I'm Jason, the world is yours, and today we have a story about CNBC schedules last call with Brian Sullivan in its evening slot after the cancellation of Shepard Smith newscast. CNBC is filling the 7 p.m. Hour with Last Call, a business show that will be anchored by Brian Sullivan and explore money, culture, and policy. That's interesting. The new show occupies the old time slot of the news with Shepard Smith, the newscast. That newscast was canceled in November. I really like that show. I really did like that show. CNBC President KC Sullivan, I don't think any relations to Brian Sullivan, who wants the network to focus on its core area of business and financial news, announced the new show in a memo to staff, along with a series of other changes to the CNBC lineup. Through panels, debates, and newsmakers, Last Call will not only deliver fresh takes on the biggest business topics of the day, but also shine a light on other important stories that our viewers may have missed, with an eye on what's going to matter to the markets the next day. That's interesting. K.C. Sullivan also said that the network would produce more documentaries and specials in prime time when the network runs reality shows like Shark Tank, Undercover Boss, and American Greed. American Greed is interesting. Not a fan of an undercover boss at all. Among other changes, Sarah Eisen will move from closing bell to co-anchor the 10 a.m. hour of Squawk on the Street, joining Carl Quintanilla and David Faber. Scott Wapner moved from closing bell overtime to closing bell at 3 p.m. Eastern, while continuing to host halftime report. Morgan Brennan moves from Squawk on the Street to co-anchor Closing Bell. Okay, so Morgan Brennan and Scott Wapner will co-anchor Closing Bell. That's interesting. Sarah Eisen was doing that show by herself, so now Scott Wapner is going to do that with Morgan Brennan. Let me see. Closing Bell. Closing Bell. Overtime. Oh, with John Fort. I should have finished that sentence. So Morgan Brennan and John Fort will co-anchor Closing Bell Overtime. Okay, Mike Santori, senior markets commentator, will appear on that show from the New York Stock Exchange. Frank Harlan will anchor Worldwide Exchange. I believe that show was anchored by Brian Sullivan before. Squawk on the Street will also expand another hour at 11 a.m., replacing Tech Check, which will now be featured on branded segments throughout the day. The changes take effect at the end of February, so there's a few more weeks for that. In 2022, Fox Business averaged 215,000 total viewers, and CNBC posted 211 during the 9 through 4 p.m. market hours, and the demo CNBC and the demo 25 through 54. My demo. CNBC averaged 42,000 and Fox Business averaged only 22,000 in total. In total day, CNBC averages 155,000 and Fox Business posted 134,000. Okay, so yeah, this a lot of moves going on here. Let me see what's going on. So Sarah Eisen, right? She used to do basically the Closing Bell. Remember, she was doing that show for almost 2 hours, and now she's going to co-anchor Squawk on the Street, joining Carl Quintanilla and David Faber. I wonder, what happened? I haven't watched CNBC in a few months, but does that move Jim Cramer off? No, because I believe Morgan Brennan was doing that role where Sarah Eisen is going to do. It's just interesting. As Sarah Eisen, last year she was doing a show. She had about like 2 hours, right? She was doing basically the Closing Bell and then the overtime, right? She would do that, and now she's only down to like co-anchoring a show with Carl Quintanilla and David Faber. One of the most watched shows of the day is Squawk on the Street. But that's gonna be at 10. Okay, at 10 a.m. So the 6 a.m. Or 9 a.m. will be still with probably Carl Quintanilla, David Faber, and Jim Cramer. So I don't believe that's changing. Morgan Brennan was doing I say 7 because I live here in the East, in Las Vegas, so I'm thinking about Las Vegas time. 6 a.m. would be the Carl Quintanilla, David Faber, and Jim Cramer show, and then 7 a.m., 11 or 10 a.m. East Coast time would be Morgan Brennan. She would jump on the show. I don't think I've ever seen Tech Check like that. I've heard of it a few times, but I guess Tech Check would be on after Squawk in the Street. But now Squawk in the Street is going to be 2 hours, right? Is that what they said? Squawk in the Street will also expand another hour at 11. So Squawk in the Street is basically like 3 hours now, right? It's going to be the 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. I got to say 6 a.m. 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and the 8 a.m. I'm assuming, I don't know. They didn't say if Sarah Eisen is going to do both of those hours, right? Is she going to do the 7 a.m. and the 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. and the 11 a.m.? The show that's going to replace Tech Check. So we have to see who's going to be the anchors for that show. I'm pretty sure it's going to still be Carl Quintanilla and David Faber. So I would imagine the first hour will be Carl Quintanilla, David Faber, Jim Cramer, and the next 2 hours will be Carl Quintanilla, David Faber, and Sarah Eisen for those 2 hours. And Squawk in the Street will expand to 3 hours now. But yeah, let me know your opinion of this change. Do you watch any of these CNBC shows, or do you watch Fox Business? I'm Jason. The world is yours. Today we will have a story about CNBC. But hold on, before I even go into that, I just want to mention I really, really, really enjoyed the news with Shepard Smith. That was one of my favorite newscasts of the day. You know, CNBC obviously is a business news, but you know, their viewers, after a full day of all business, when the markets are closed, like you don't have to still talk about like market news, market news for the next day. I thought Shepard Smith show was great because it just kind of focused on like the news stories of the day. They would give a lot of news stories, not too many like editorial opinions. It was just like news story after news story after news story after I really like shows like that, and I felt like MSNBC had that with the 11th hour with Brian Williams. That show went off the air also. So it's just kind of disappointing because, like I said, those two shows were really, really good. And I can't stress it enough how much I really, really enjoyed the news with Shepard Smith. Brian Sullivan is a cool dude. I've seen Brian, the Worldwide Exchange, a few mornings with Brian Sullivan. I think it comes on like 2 a.m. Vegas time. I believe that's around the time that show comes on, but it's a good show. We'll see how long that show goes. Last call with Brian Sullivan. But I'm Jason. The world is yours. Today we had a story about CNBC schedules last call with Brian Sullivan in the evening slot after the cancellation of one of my favorite shows, The News with Shepard Smith. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the $1 donation button, and please tune in to the next video on this channel. Thanks a million for watching.